it's explosive speed as well. So he got described to me earlier this year as being like the Roadrunner, in the sense that he can be standing still and within 10 metres it's beep beep and he's gone. So you add that to a midfield that's like James Worpel, Tom Mitchell, Liam Shields, Jago O'Meara. These players who are really good in and under players, but they're not that quick. That's what I like about Mitchell. He adds a bit of versatility to that midfield group.
No, certainly needs some speed to Hawthorn. And, of course, Connor Downey, as Mitch mentioned, is the only player still at this Connors Sports draft event that hasn't had his name called out, but we assume that at some point the Hawks will add him to their list.
Yeah, and that's a good point, Nat. They'd be rapt that got through. I think the next chance that a bid comes for him would be at Geelong, which at the moment is pick 32. Okay. So that's changing as the sort of night rolls out. But I think the Cats would be a potential bidder at that point for Connor Downey. But the Hawks clearly would be rapt to be doing that. So, yeah, I think it's a good decision for them. And now the Pies, we've linked a number of players to them. And,
I can't believe they're back on the clock.
and one of them,
Collingwood again?
imagine soon they'd be making a selection. Look, one of the guys that... It's either Jack Carroll or Caleb Poulter, I think, at this pick.
And you are correct. Caleb Poulter makes his way to the Collingwood Football Club at pick 30.
Yeah, and he's a left footer who uses the ball really well. Averaged about 25 touches at under 18 level this year, Riley. He can play on a wing as well, half forward. Yeah, he's someone who is quite damaging with his ball use. The Pies had some interest in him earlier. In the end, they managed to get him a little bit later. So their draft hand's looking pretty good. I do think that it's a pretty good mix of players now that they've got, and they've been moving picks around, but they've clearly targeted a few players in there that they've managed to land. So Poulter, for me, is a good selection at pick 30. Yeah,
I really like it in the sense that 192 centimetre midfielder who can play inside or outside in that midfield group. So adds a little bit of versatility for them. He complements Finlay McRae and Reef McGuinness really well. And I'm going to make another comment on it, but one of the best mullets in the field, honestly. One of the most extreme out there.
You're obsessed with mullets. First it was Jack Bowie's got the best mullet going around, the orange mullet. You've got your own mullet. Jeez.
Mate, we stick together.
Yeah,
we stick together. We got it. So I like this pick for Collingwood. I like what he can add to him, and I think the three midfielders they've got alongside Ollie Henry in this year's draft crop, I think they've done really well for themselves.
Finlay McRae and Reef McInnes, as we mentioned, Caleb Poulter now added to that. So pick
they go again.
31, they go again, just when we thought we couldn't get enough of the Pies.
Drag us back in.
Is this where they can get Jack Carroll, maybe?
Yeah, they can go that way. He's probably the one at the moment that I think, is the outlier.
Okay.
He's the outlier. Or do they place a bid on Errol Goulden at this point, who is still on the board? In the end, as we always say, there's so much talk and I get sucked into it, we all get sucked into it. The bids for these players end up largely coming later than they probably should, because the clubs around this point haven't done the work on these guys. They just haven't, this year particularly, they've had low-resourced recruiting teams. They haven't had as much time and people and expenses to go and spend on these kids. You're going to prioritise the ones you think you could get.
Yeah,
and Errol Goulden, everyone throughout this year thought, well, he's going to go to the Swans.
No, certainly right. I mean, the recruiting landscape has changed a lot in 2020 from Zoom interviews and the likes. You missed out on some good feeds this year too, Cal, which was disappointing. You love a free feed.
I got about 4 months of him in the hub.
Oh, that's true. That is very true. Don't remind us about those free feeds. So we're just waiting for Collingwood to make their selection. They're halfway through their 5 minutes. And then after them, you mentioned the Cats at pick 32, that they could be the ones to make a bid on Connor Downey, who's tied to Hawthorn's Next Generation Academy.
We're starting to zip through, that's for sure. And as I said before, I think that there's these players now that are starting to pick off prospects like Hawthorn with Seamus Mitchell. He probably wasn't going before that pick, and there's going to be a range of them now. I wouldn't be surprised if within the next 10 or 12 picks we start seeing some passes, to be honest. So clubs holding over selections for rookie draft or just for next year's pre-season spots and some train-on spots. So, yeah, there's a big call coming from the Pies. They've had a busy hand. They've made some bids. They've matched a bid as well with Reef McInnes. They got their 2 first-rounders in. They've been active. Look, I think Derek Hine, he called it, he orchestrated it, he nailed it. He was going to be very busy and the phones were always going to be hot, and that's the case it's been. So there's a lot happening.
Now, we spoke to Mitch Cleary and Archie Perkins, and we were hoping that Archie was wearing the fedora, and we asked him to get Mitch Cleary to pop it on, and I believe we have some Cleary wearing a fedora. I never thought I would see that in his life. He's wearing a suit and a fedora.
I think it looks better on Archie, but no, well done, Mitch. We love Mitch getting involved for our show.
I'm tapping out of this year's draft.
Things I didn't
That's
think.
the highlight.
That wasn't on the bingo card. Mitch Cleary in a fedora.
That's going to be on next year's bingo card for sure. Mitch Cleary in a fedora. Should be at some music festival in Byron. Maybe not in a suit, though. As we get back to the draft, which is what we're here for, the 2020 NAB AFL draft. We're just waiting for Collingwood to make their selection. And they've done so, Cal. And with pick 31, Collingwood has selected Liam McMahon to go alongside Caleb Poulter, as well as Oliver Henry, Finlay McRae and Reef McInnes.
Yeah, key forward who I really liked what I saw from him last year. I reckon I was at that game. And he was taking marks and doing some really exciting things. So, yeah, we obviously didn't get the chance to show that this year in the NAB League for the Northern Knights, but can go forward. Also can play back and probably started this year as one of these tools in the middle ranges of the draft, and that's where he's ended it. So certainly a prospect to a few clubs were eyeing off.
Well, there was a query going into this year's draft whether or not they had a long-term number one marking option in their forward line. We thought maybe Nick Cox might be an option for them if they were to trade up the order. Liam McMahon's another option for them, who they've managed to get at pick 31. So you look, Mason Cox and Brodie Myercheck, two nice options now to